Thanks for your patience, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. By now, you should have all the recording permissions that you need. My name is Rich Chapman. I'm the Interim Communications Director for the Mayor. And today, the Mayor will be speaking about the investments he's making in public safety using funds from the fall budget monitoring process. After the Mayor speaks, we'll do a Q&A. We ask that you use the raise your hand function we're actually going to use the raise your hand function, and I'll call on you to ask your question to the Mayor. So with that, we'll turn it over to you, Mayor Ted Wheeler.
Thanks, Rich, and thank you everybody for joining us this afternoon. And thank you for your patience. We had a few delays, and I appreciate everybody hanging in there. This is the deadliest era in modern times for the city of Portland. As 2021 winds down, we have surpassed a historical threshold with 72 homicides and over 1,000 shootings in our city. Back in April of this year, I saw what you did. Increased tension after a tough economic year, an upsurge in gang-affiliated activity, and a mental and physical health crisis, all impacting our community simultaneously. Many Portlanders no longer feel safe in their city. Business owners have closed up shop for fear of doing business in high-risk areas. Commuters fear for their safety, whether taking public transit or going by foot. Parents are scared to let their children play outside. People are leaving for work, going to the supermarket, or grabbing drinks with friends and not returning home. I hear your fear and your frustration. The tremendous loss our city has seen is not lost on me as your mayor. There is no amount of sympathy or symbol of solidarity that I can offer that will take away the pain of these losses. As a leader of this city, what these families and the greater community want and need from me and the city council is increased action and better results. My priorities have not changed. I remain committed to addressing houselessness, improving livability, supporting economic recovery, and increasing public safety. For the purposes of our time today, I'll share my vision for public safety investments in the city of Portland. Over the last 8 months, I've pushed to increase the capacity and improve the quality of our crisis response system. I created the Enhanced Community Safety Team, which focuses on the investigations of shootings in Portland. I created the Focused Intervention Team, a unit within PPB that seeks to intervene and prevent gun violence. Over 30 officers have now answered the call to fill the 12 available positions within the Focused Intervention Team, knowing the danger and the difficulty of the work that lies ahead. The Focused Intervention Team Community Oversight Group is working with the Portland Police Bureau to carefully review the applications to finalize the members of the team. Chief Lavelle and I remain committed to selecting the Focused Intervention Team by the end of this month. Portland Street Response has emerged as an effective element to our emergency response for community members who are experiencing mental health crises. I'd like to thank Commissioner Hardesty for her continued leadership in bringing this important response service to our city, and I appreciate our partnership in expanding it. We're looking forward to expanding this program citywide, prioritizing some of the hardest hit areas of our city. We understand and we embrace the value of upstream violence prevention. We invested heavily in this work earlier this year. We planted important seeds of change with long-term upstream investments that are in the final phase of dispersing $4 million to community-based organizations working to address gun violence. These community-based organizations support individuals and families vulnerable to and impacted by gun violence. We also understand that there are dangerous people in our city that no amount of upstream prevention will deter from committing acts of violence. These individuals must be held accountable for the crimes that they commit. So while I'm about to discuss investments towards better training, tools, staffing for our police, I want to be clear that these investments will support and complement the important role that community-based organizations play in our violence reduction efforts. Sustainable change requires a holistic both-and approach. We must work to fill the very real and very urgent service gap while supporting long-term upstream community-based solutions to reducing gun violence in Portland. The city is navigating a historic $62 million one-time surplus within our fall budget process. I'm committed to investing in programs that address houselessness and improve public safety. These funds are an opportunity to stabilize our city and can act as a bridge while we wait for longer-term investments to take shape. I'm going to take just a few moments to overview the investments I've proposed in this fall budget process around public safety. You'll notice that they align with the framework that guides our community safety plan to refocus, reform, and restaff as we work to improve our effectiveness, transparency, and accountability. First of all, refocusing. Over 1 million calls for service were logged in 2020, and we're anticipating even greater numbers for 2021. Portlanders are facing wait times when they call 911, and our police are overwhelmed by the amount of calls that they're receiving. We need to be more thoughtful about the responders we deploy to ensure the assistance we provide is tailored to the needs of our community and that our resources are being used as effectively as possible. As such, Community Safety Transition Director Mike Myers is working alongside the Police Bureau, Fire and Rescue, Emergency Communications, the Portland Street Response, and our expanded 311 system to appropriately triage 911 calls to ensure that we assign calls to the appropriate response service. We will always need emergency response measures, but the response we deploy needs to fit the specific call for assistance. Oftentimes, an armed police officer is not the best responder for a non-emergency call, mental health calls, and others. We need to invest in alternative policing solutions. So we will expand our public safety support specialists, sometimes called our PS3 program, to 40 specialists. PS3s are law enforcement agents that provide an unarmed response to low acuity emergency calls. This frees up our police officers to be able to respond to higher acuity emergency calls. There is great potential to continue to expanding this group to take on crime prevention duties. Greater alignment between the city and county will also improve the effectiveness of our gun violence reduction plan. We will hire a consultant to draft a plan that identifies gaps and duplications within county and city-funded programs, opportunities for partnerships and investments, evaluates services and programs, and provides key performance indicators and measurements, and much, much more. Reforming. People across the country banded together last summer to speak to injustice within law enforcement. Our city stood with them, and we will continue to stand with them. I support those Portland Police Bureau staff who are truly community-minded and hardworking. The best way to support our emergency responders is to ensure that they are equipped with the training, the tools, the resources, and the personnel required for them to be able to do their jobs effectively and safely. We also need to change how our officers, new recruits, and seasoned officers alike are trained. We will hire a dean of police education and training to develop and institute a research-based curriculum, training protocols and procedures that align with current best practices. We need to have greater transparency to improve accountability and build trust within our community. We will fund an independent assessment of our crowd control procedures and provide recommendations on how to improve our response. $2.65 million will equip our officers with body-worn cameras, a necessary component of modern policing to increase transparency and accountability. This tool will benefit the officers that wear them and the community they serve by promoting better understanding of critical incidents and allowing for reflection and correction where necessary. Restaffing. Starting in the fiscal year 22-23, my goal is to bring on 300 staff for the Portland Police Bureau in 3 years. 200 of these staff will be fully certified armed officers, and 100 will be unarmed community safety specialists, PS3s. I know how bold a goal this is. Portland is not alone by any measure in the uphill battle to recruit the best and the brightest. This search is made even more challenging when looking to fill public safety positions. We need to be proactive in our recruiting of the next generation of public safety workers. We will invest in recruitment initiatives that bring together a diverse and energetic recruitment team to connect with potential candidates. Younger generations are seeking meaningful employment. Portland is primed to provide that meaning. We're looking for a new wave of officers who believe in community engaged policing and who will mirror the values of our city: anti-racism, transparency, and equity. We need to incentivize those entering the workforce to join our team. As such, we will begin bargaining with the Portland Police Association to seek approval to offer signing bonuses of up to $25,000 to the first 50 officers who are qualified or PS3 recruits. I'll have more details on this offering next week. We also need to build capacity so that we're able to quickly and effectively train new recruits. $856,000 will go towards standing up our own basic training academy in the Portland metro area. This will help expedite the training process for new recruits. Additional funds will bring more resources to our background investigation teams so that we can onboard quality officers at a faster pace. In the near term, I'm asking my colleagues on City Council to support immediate staffing solutions in the Portland Police Bureau. The Great Resignation, as it's called, is well underway. We need to remain competitive as an employer and work hard to retain the good talent that we have. I'm asking my colleagues to promote retention by offering longevity bonuses for current officers based on their length of employment. Our police bureau staffing levels are at record lows, and based on projected retirements, staffing levels will continue to dwindle unless we take decisive action now. We will fund a rehire option for recently retired or soon to be retired officers to come back to work for a 2-year period to fill this critical need. My hope would be to bring back 25 officers for this fiscal year and an additional 25 next year. To the individuals who've expressed interest in returning to the police force, thank you for your past hard work as well as the work yet to come. We need you. We will hire a consultant through the Community Safety Division to analyze the Portland Police Bureau's staffing minimums to determine and model out new minimums based on a deeper understanding of the time and tasks that the Bureau is being allocated towards, the types of calls that they are responding to, and we will have a plan for staffing that goes beyond the 300 in 3 years that I suggested and the 25 rehires this year and the 25 next year. We will have a comprehensive year-by-year staffing strategy for the next 5 years. This will result in a series of options that will improve response times and the numbers of investigative crimes that will be presented to the community for input and result in improved staffing recommendations to the Portland City Council. Without these investments, the outlook for violence in our city is grim. We need comprehensive solutions that reform, refocus, and restaff provides the framework to do just that. Police Chief Chuck Lavelle and his colleagues know it's a new day in law enforcement, and that requires deeper transparency and accountability. But they also need the resources to build the required infrastructure. Whether addressing public safety with a prevention or intervention lens, any effective effort will require time and investment to disrupt the cycle of violence. I understand the frustration that people are expressing, and I want to act quickly. But time has given us the ability to be more thoughtful and intention in how we refocus, reform, and restaff. It's allowed it's allowed us to better integrate community participation and oversight. We have an opportunity to make sustainable change through investments. My proposal puts over $7 million towards increasing and improving our public safety response in just this year alone. As we wrap up this fall budget process, I have my eye to the future as well. I will continue to prioritize public safety, and we will bring additional funding proposals to the council for the fiscal year 22-23 budget, the process of which starts this spring. We will continue backing these investments and improving public safety across the city. That is my commitment to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. At this time, we are going to open up the floor to questions. We do want everyone to know that a lot of these specific investments are still being negotiated when it comes to the fall bump investments. And so maybe guide your questions accordingly, taking that into consideration. So at this point, we'll just have you guys actually use the raise your hand function, and I will call on you. I believe you're going to need to actually unmute yourself. And also, if you wouldn't mind, please introduce yourself with name and agency. And our first question will be from Andrew Dorn, KGW.
Hi, Mayor Wheeler. Andrew Dorn with KGW News here. Wanted to get your take on the People for Portland campaign and what impact that has had, if any.
Well, it certainly highlights what I already know to be true. The people in this city are deeply concerned about public safety, about homelessness, particularly the proliferation of unsanctioned homeless camps, livability issues around litter and graffiti, as well as ensuring that we have a sound economic recovery after COVID. These have been the priorities of my administration. In every one of those areas, we've been very aggressive about standing up actionable strategies to improve things. And this fall budget process is a continuation of that effort. They have certainly put the spotlight on these issues. They've certainly put a lot of pressure on local elected officials, and I would expect them to continue to do so.
Thanks.
Thanks, Andrew. Wright Gazaway, you're up next.
Mayor, it's Wright Gazaway with K2. I have a question about patrolling, but really quickly, do you think you could do the bonuses on your own, or will that need any sort of council approval?
It will likely require council approval, and there are probably some legal issues that need to be hashed out as well.
Okay, got it. Real quick on staffing, given that hiring doesn't happen overnight, if there is such a critical concern about answering 911 calls, are you having conversations with Chief Lavelle about further reorganizing staffing to get more sworn members on patrol?
There are few ways to do that without calling on our existing officers to give even more than they already have. And I want to be clear, the work of the men and women in the Portland Police Bureau is difficult. It's often dangerous. And for the last approximately 2 years, we've limited their time off. We have called them back from vacations. We imposed on their family time. And what they have expressed to me is they're exhausted and the morale is declining by the day. They need help. And so however you feel about policing, the bottom line is they can't do their jobs effectively if they don't have the tools, the resources, the training, and the support personnel to be able to do their jobs well. And so I have identified what I think are the right strategies, including the Retire Rehire program in the near term, a commitment to increasing the number of officers in the Portland Police Bureau in the coming months and years ahead, making sure that we are refocusing 911 calls to other types of service providers, whether it's the Portland Street Response or the PS3s, to reduce the number of calls that are going towards our police officers. And by the way, the Fire Bureau is under exactly the same type of pressure to reduce the calls that are going to the Fire Bureau and other first responder agencies. And those are going to continue to be the areas of focus. We're adding a few other innovative ideas here, including hiring and retention bonuses. But the bottom line is really getting back to the basics. We have a critically understaffed Portland Police Bureau, and that is leading to lags in call response. And it's also putting a lot of pressure on the men and the women in the police bureau to provide more and more service with fewer and fewer resources. That's not sustainable.
Okay, and for those of you who have used the raise your hand function to ask questions, I accidentally lowered a few of those hands, and I apologize for that. If you are waiting to ask a question, please just go ahead and check and make sure that that your hand is raised. And I apologize to those that did that too. Sarah Hurwitz, you're up next.
Hi, Sarah.
Hey, Mayor, thanks so much. I just had a quick question. You know, this is something that's been talked about for months now. And obviously there have been a lot of meetings, a lot of community coordination to try to figure out how to address the issue of gun violence here in Portland. Why has it taken so long to get to this point, though? Why so many shootings, so many people's lives that have been lost up until this point? Why are we now seeing some of this kind of concrete solutions, some of this plan that you're laying out?
Well, there's been no delay on my part. Last spring, I directed Chief Lavelle, actually it was earlier than last spring, to stand up the enhanced community safety team. That is 22 officers, sergeants, and lieutenants who focus on after the fact investigative follow-up. The goal there was to make sure that every shooting situation in our city got the attention it deserved and to hold people accountable who are engaged in criminal activity. Last spring, in March, I brought forth a proposal to the Portland City Council that would have funded the focused intervention team. That's a police team that intervenes and prevents gun violence through the Portland Police Bureau. That was a community-led proposal. It didn't come from me. It came from the community, including prominent African-American leaders here in the city of Portland. It also included significant non-police investments like in park rangers, and it also included a call for increased investments in community-based organizations that work to help lift people who are impacted the most by gun violence and help support the health of their families and connect them to educational or economic opportunities as an alternative, and to help people better understand how to resolve conflict without the use of a firearm. I brought that proposal forward. I was pleased that my colleagues agreed that I could use existing resources to begin the work around the focused intervention team, but there was only one enthusiastic vote in support of funding that team, mine. People testified at that time that they believed that Portland was set up for a very bloody summer, and unfortunately, that is what came to pass. So here we are months and months later. The focused intervention team now has the 3 lieutenants who will be running it. It has the 2 sergeants who are outstanding sergeants who will be running it at the street level. We now have over 30 applicants for 12 positions. I believe that position actually closes, the listing closes this Friday. We've got 3 times as many candidates as we have slots. I am confident that we'll be able to do the work that we've promised to do to have it staffed this month. But I will be coming back to the City Council during the spring budget process because we need to sustain the funding. We found the resources by by looking under all the cushions in the Portland Police Bureau this spring and this summer. But now we need to make a commitment as a city council that we are going to fund on a long-term basis the focused intervention team and the enhanced community safety team in order to reduce gun violence in our community. That's my ask of my colleagues.
Thank you, Sarah. Maxine, you're up.
Hi, Max.
Hi, thank you, Mayor. So the last time that I think the Bureau really stepped up its recruitment efforts to try to bring in lots of officers was back in '99 through Operation 80. And at that time, fell short of 80 and hired 71. So I'm just wondering, what type of recruitment efforts do you think it's going to take to reach your goal? And I know there's been, the Bureau has been calling for new officers or more officers for at least the past year or so. Why are you now seeking the money?
So first of all, let me be clear. My first budget in my first year as mayor included funding for dozens more police officers. I don't remember the exact number off the top of my head. I think it was maybe 68. This was well before George Floyd and some of the demonstrations that we saw in the city of Portland during the summer of 2020 and beyond. And we weren't able to fill all the positions then, even under the best of circumstances. So I understand that this 300 personnel goal is a very aggressive goal, but I'm willing to align investments to help make it happen. For example, the recruiting and the retention bonuses is one piece of that. We have heard that one of the pinch points in the hiring process, it takes 18 to 24 months once you hire a police officer to actually get them trained and then certified under the Oregon state requirements. We're putting money aside for our own academy with the hope that we'll be able to actually do the training here in the local metro area. And we want to work with some of our other jurisdictional partners on that as a potential partnership here in the Portland metro area. Obviously, we are increasing the funding for those who actually do recruiting. For the longest time, we've had a very limited recruitment function in the police bureau as we've deployed people out of recruiting and put them on the streets. And while that might have made sense in the very short term, long term, it's disastrous when you have the all of these people, the great resignation, you have baby boomers that are reaching retirement age, you have a lot of people questioning whether public safety is a viable long-term career. And we go into this movement with a critical shortage of police officers. So we have to beef up the recruiting function, which we are doing. We have to think about whatever types of bonuses or incentives would be required to bring people in and keep them there. We have to invest specifically in our training needs to make sure that we can train people as quickly as possible. And then we need to give our officers the tools, the resources, the training, and their fellow personnel to a degree that they feel that they can both be effective in their jobs as well as safe on the job, and address some of the morale issues that we've heard.
Pat, you're up next. Pat, if you wouldn't mind just sharing your full name and agency you work with.
Hi, Pat.
Hello. Could you hear me okay?
Yeah, loud and clear.
All right. Sorry, using a different mic. Pat Doris, KGW TV. Mr. Mayor, back in June of 2020, you talked about supporting a proposal to cut $7 million from the police budget. And I believe the total cut ended up being $15 million. And now you're adding $7 million back. I'm wondering, what are we to make of sort of the whipsawing back and forth on this?
This is not an executive form of mayoralty. I am one of 5 legislators. And so behind the scenes, there are always negotiations. So let me take you back even one step prior to that. When COVID hit, what I had proposed originally as a no-cut budget turned out to be a $95 million general fund reduction. Guess which bureau gets the lion's share of general fund resources? That would be the police bureau, our public safety bureau, one of our public safety bureaus. And so there was no way to protect the police bureau from a general fund reduction of that size. There were different proposals that were put forth by the city council, some as large as, if I recall, I think it was $28 million in reduction. I put forth 7. We ended up in the 12 to 14, and that was just the outcome of negotiations with my colleagues on the city council.
Okay, Alex, you're up next.
Thanks. Yeah, this is Alex with the Portland Mercury.
Hey, Alex.
Hey, so you mentioned body cams and also an independent assessment of crowd control. I'm curious if you could explain which other of these public safety proposals are pieces that are kind of required under the current mediation with DOJ. What kind of number of pieces that you're introducing are kind of tied into those talks?
Yeah, and I'm probably gonna wish that I had more time to actually check the documents, so I may add to the list. But certainly the Department of Justice has pushed us very, very hard on body-worn cameras, and that's when I'm actually pleased that they're pushing us on. The idea of a civilian dean of training is an idea that was generated through our conversations with the United States Department of Justice. They like that idea of civilian engagement and oversight of the training function. So do I. That is a best practice reform that currently exists throughout the United States. They've been concerned also about some of the issues that I've mentioned here around the training programs, around the retention programs. They are certainly, although it's not necessarily part of the direct negotiations we're having with the DOJ, I know they're enthusiastically supportive of programs like the Portland Street Response, which this spring proposal will continue to expand into other parts of the city where it's desperately needed. We've gotten into some arcane issues that are also concerning to people around the 911 call system and the 311 system. Commissioner Mapps is doing some great work there, and I intend to support the requests that he's put forward around 311 and 911 as part of the proposed bump package that I'll be releasing tomorrow. There are probably other things that I can't remember right off the top of my head, but there's no question that we go into those negotiations with the Department of Justice with serious intent to get out from under that settlement agreement as quickly as possible. So I'm very open to their recommendations. Many of them have been outstanding, and we embrace those which we think we can here in the near term.
Liz, you're up next.
Hey, Mayor, thanks so much for your time. Liz Birch with Coin 6 News. I was wondering how you respond to critics who have been asking where the leadership has been over the summer on this issue. I hear you saying you're doing everything you can. When can we expect to see results?
Well, I have been here for 5 years, and I've been leading for 5 years, and I've been pushing the same priorities: public safety, addressing homelessness, addressing livability, and supporting an equitable recovery in our community, meaning we also support small businesses and businesses owned and operated by people of color and women. I actually believe that public sentiment is moving closer to my agenda than perhaps it was previously. And some of the things that I could not get through my city council last year or the year before, I believe I can build appropriate support on the city council to get through now.
And Tess, you're up next.
Hi, Tess.
Hey, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, it's a little quiet, but I can hear you.
Okay, I'll just speak up. So my question is about body cameras. First, do you know how many body cameras you're expecting to purchase with that $2.6 million? And then second, when and how will the policy for body-worn cameras be, decided or crafted?
Yeah, so with regard to the first part of the question, I'd have to steer you towards the Portland Police Bureau, or Bobby. Maybe we can follow up directly with Tess and get her that number. I don't remember it right off the top of my head, and I don't want to give you bad information, Tess, so we will get that to you. With regard to the policies, you've hit the nail on the head. The hardest part about this is not a hardware problem. You're basically buying jazzed up GoPro cameras. That's the easy part. The part that makes this so complicated Tess, I know you know this, but I want to just expound on this for the public's benefit for a moment. It's really a data management problem. For example, let me just paint a picture. If an officer is wearing a body-worn camera and an officer is called into a domestic violence situation, there are aspects of that that you may or may not want kept in the public view. Therefore, you need people who go in and review all of that footage to determine what can be released to the public and what is inappropriate or even illegal to release to the public. And that's the data management question. There's other questions that have not been answered yet, and we're in negotiations with the Portland Police Association. Basic questions like who owns the data? What happens to the data after a case has been cleared? If somebody is incidentally seen in the footage, potentially breaking the law, is that admissible? So there's a lot of issues that have yet to be addressed, that have not been addressed, and we're actually engaged in those conversations right now with the labor union as well as members of the Portland City Council.
And I just wanted to tack on, will those conversations be happening in public, or are they all going to be happening behind closed doors?
Well, the ones that happen with the Portland Police Association, which are some of the most substantive conversations, happen in accordance with the rules that the city and the Portland Police Association established. Our side has largely been open. The other meetings have largely been closed. And so I can't say today one way or the other with any certainty.
All right, Jonathan.
Hi, good afternoon, Mayor.
Hey, Jonathan.
Hi. There have been periods of high crime rates in the city's history when PPB had a much larger per capita force. Why do you think that this time is different and that more police will address the crime problem this time around?
There is a such thing as too few officers, and we've reached that point. And what I look at objectively as proof of that is the amount of time that people are waiting for a response to an emergency call to 911. And I want to be clear, it's not all on the police. We also need more dispatchers, and we need better technology in our 911 call center. And we need to be able to shunt non-emergency calls out of the 911 system into the 311 system. And I'm really pleased with the work that's being done in the Bureau of Emergency Communications. I'm pleased with the partnership I have with Mingus Maps to try to rationalize some of these different systems and make sure that not everything is getting to the Portland Police Bureau. The other thing is just in terms of nickels and dimes. And I don't see this as important as response time, but as the number of officers deployable into the field diminishes, what you do is you start backfilling those positions so that you have at least a minimum threshold response by dismantling specialty units. In other words, units that work on issues potentially like traffic enforcement. You take people off traffic enforcement and you put them out in the field as regular field officers, but then what you immediately see is the proverbial balloon. You pinch it in one place, it expands in the other. What you immediately see in that scenario is more traffic violations and people driving more recklessly and people getting killed or injured as a result. So I believe that objectively, if you look at call response time, if you look at the lack of our specialty units, if you look at the frustration that the community is experiencing when they call and they say somebody broke into my house or my business and it takes hours and hours, if not days, for a police response, I can objectively say we are critically short-staffed.
Okay, and
by the way, when we backfill positions, it's not just by dismantling units. Sometimes it's just by paying extra, paying overtime. It's bad bang for the buck. We could hire a lot more officers and actually reduce the total cost of the police bureau by investing less in overtime.
all right, so next question is from Rebecca Ellis.
Hi, Rebecca.
Hi, Mayor Wheeler. Obviously the police union has been pushing for increased staffing for a while now. I'm wondering if you expect hiring these additional officers will give you additional leverage and basically help with the PPA contract negotiations.
That's a good question. They are tough negotiators, and I believe that there is alignment as we've gone into our negotiations. I'm obviously not allowed to talk about specifics, but I can tell you there are areas where we are in broad agreement. And what really drives that is the understanding that we are concerned about our public employees. We're concerned about morale. We're concerned about their health and their well-being. And we hear them when they say that they they're responding to too many calls in an environment where they're being asked to work really long hours, evenings and weekends. And so I actually think the common touch point for us is just understanding that our police bureau is at a low morale point, that there are fewer and fewer people who want to continue to work there, that we need to do better to get them all of the things I've mentioned: tools, resources, training, and personnel to support their efforts. And again, that's in no way to discount any of the reforms, the community engagement, the accountability, the transparency that we're calling for. All those things can happen hand in hand.
And Liz, you got a question?
Yeah, thank you. I just had a follow-up to the mayor's response to my question. You're saying that you have the support you need on city council now, but you didn't before. What do you think has changed with the city commissioners? Why do you think they'll vote to support these solutions that you're proposing now?
Well, number one, we have a relatively new city council. And I enjoy working with my colleagues. We're all over the board in terms of our backgrounds and experiences and how we approach various issues. We have very significant disagreements, but we all get along pretty well. So number one, the players have changed, and I believe they're willing to look at the objective facts and make decisions based on objective facts. And number two, they're hearing from the public loudly and clearly that the public wants to feel safer. And for them, that means not only investments in community, education, job training, and support for vulnerable people in the community. It means more officers, so that when they pick up the phone at 4 a.m. and call 911, they know somebody's actually going to respond. And it means having a specific strategy to address the record gun violence that we've seen in this community. I've offered the enhanced community safety team, the focused intervention team. I've offered the support of more police officers in the police bureau. We're offering to improve our recruiting and our retention practices. We're reforming our training practices. I think over the long term, my colleagues have heard all these same things from people in the community. And we're not even talking about it today, but they're hearing about the concerns that people have around unsanctioned homeless camps. They're concerned about what they're hearing about livability around litter and graffiti. And in this fall bump, we're supporting programs in each and every one of those areas. They're all code red. They are all urgent issues. They all deserve our attention. And if I have my way, all these issues are going to get the attention of the full city council in the next couple of days.
And Tess.
Thanks. So between mediation with the DOJ and the PPA, a lot of these important public safety conversations are happening out of the public's view. I'm just wondering, as the mayor, how important is it for you for the public to be involved in these conversations? And is there any way that you can increase the transparency around these conversations or involve community members more?
Yeah, thank you for asking this question, because you just hit on a really important point. You can't build trust in policing if you don't have accountability and transparency in policing. The public needs to know what's going on. They need to see the sausage making. And unfortunately, the DOJ settlement agreement is a legal proceeding, meaning you have various parties that go beyond the DOJ in the city of Portland. And there are a lot of negotiations, and those negotiations are confidential. And that's really unfortunate. The public will hear about the results after the fact, but while those discussions are going on, we can only talk about them in the most general sense. I can tell you there's very little being discussed behind closed doors that I don't think most people, not everybody, but most people in the public would probably be supportive of. But I have to adhere to the rules established under the settlement agreement. And so unfortunately, a lot of those conversations are not public. Similarly, the discussions with the Portland Police Association around collective bargaining. Personally, I would have liked all of those discussions to be transparent to the public. And we will have an opportunity as we get to the end of those negotiations to have a public vetting of what happened behind closed doors. And I plan to be there, and others from the legal team plan to be there. But while those negotiations are going on, I have to adhere to the rules that were established by the involved parties.
Okay, and our last question is going to come from Alex.
Hey, Alex.
Hey, thanks. You mentioned how you have the support on City Council for most of these policies, or at least you think you do. I'm curious if there were other public safety programs or policies that you'd ideally want to introduce right now, but you don't think you have the support on council to get through. What would those be?
If I could, well, that's actually a really interesting question. The things that I would like to improve right now, there's no question about it. I need the gun issue resolved in our community. The focused intervention team needs to be in the field yesterday. We need more officers, stat, and the calls for accountability and transparency need to be implemented alongside all of the work that we're doing. I feel like we're moving at the right pace, at the right time with the resources that we currently have available. I'm not sure I could actually recruit faster than what we've currently established as our objectives. But what I'd really like the City Council to do is, in a unified manner, acknowledge that we hear the community's frustration and anger and fear around the safety for themselves and their families. And so part of what I want to tangibly demonstrate, not only through this fall budget process, but in all of the budgets that follow, that I hear Portlanders, that I see Portlanders, and that I understand and share their frustration and their sense of urgency around these issues.
Okay. Looks like that is going to be it for our questions today. I just want to mention to everyone, the mayor has definitely asked all of us in communications to be very prompt with getting you guys information on the specifics here with these fall bump investments. We want to make sure that that information is accurate, and so we will be getting that to you as soon as possible, but please keep in mind that some of this stuff is still under negotiation. With that, we'd like to thank the mayor and thank our ASL team for their translation today, and we'll close out there.
Thank you, everybody.